Hey, I guess we're on, everybody. Welcome. This is our second meeting of the INAV Fixed Wing Group chat. We just kind of an informal get together, talk about things of interest. We have a great show today. We have, first of all, the mix master himself, Mr. Mark Hoffman. Hey, Mark.
Hey guys, yeah, now it works. I didn't find the unmute button. No, but yeah, great to.
We're still getting used to all this.
Yeah, great great to be here again with you guys, and I hope we will have a great stream again.
Okay, fabulous. Hey, and also back for another appearance. Now I got to tell you, people ask why we do these. There's one point in particular we're trying to get across, which is Darren and I are both slobs, and if we don't do this, we'll never clean our offices. So it's the only reason we put these shows together. So back again for our second time is Darren Lines. Darren, how you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good, Steve. And yeah, you're 100% right. If behind that green screen is an absolute mess, that's the only reason that's there. But yeah, it's great to be back. These things are a lot of fun, and hopefully it helps people out. And yeah, it's just great to have a little chat, really.
Fabulous. So, great to hear. We have a special guest today. This is a guy who's kind of an interesting guy. I really wanted to have him join the group because he would join the group, but he started contributing right away, and he started doing really interesting things. And I think he got a lot of fame in the group for making the yardstick plane, which so this is a guy who kind of embraced INAV, took it and really just ran with it. And then got into scratch building. And so he's kind of like, he's gone a different direction with scratch building that I haven't seen before. So that's really one of the main reasons why I get him on the show. But Jonathan Jelkin, he's also here from Southern California.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, great to have you. And I want to go over your bio. You are from Nebraska.
Yeah, originally from Nebraska, moved out to LA like 10 years ago, and I work in film and TV, so this is kind of the place to come. So yeah, moved out here about 10 years ago, and as we were talking a little bit before the show started, I started when I was 8 years old flying RC. My dad and I built a balsa gas trainer and did that, and then got into RC cars for a little bit. And then once college years started, money gets tight and you got other interests. So kind of dropped off the RC things there for a while, but I was always really interested in it and kept following it still. And then I think Park Zone came out with these Ultra Micro 1S park flyers, and I didn't even know about LiPo batteries or anything, because my old days were the NiCads with RC cars. So I was like, oh man, this looks awesome. I'm gonna get one of these. They were cheap. So I ended up with 5 of those and a box full of parts. And my old goal was, I don't want to learn about what batteries mean. I don't want to learn about 2S, 3S, milliamps, because I know it's going to be bad. And then I finally learned, and it was over. So then FPV and battery chargers and planes, and then I just got cars again recently too. So now this is one of the things when we do our INAV wish, I'm going to have some rover wishes. So, but yeah, really into the hobby again still.
Fabulous. It's great. So there's a lot to jump into there. One of the things that I'm kind of curious about, the film industry. What do you do in the film industry?
So primarily I've always done post-production, and I do a lot of motion graphics and VFX work. I do have my 107, so I've also done some drone work. I did a Target commercial and a couple different things. So
oh, cool.
So yeah, I float around. 107 work in Hollywood has gotten pretty tight, where it's a couple big companies kind of solidified everything. So it's a lot more scattered now, but I kind of knew that was going to happen. It was just such a popular thing in the media, drones, all this thing, that a lot of people jumped in. So we'll see how that goes over the next couple of years, if some of the new people fall out and the serious people stick with it or what.
Oh, cool. That sounds fantastic. Hey, before we get into everything, I know I swore to everyone we're not going to talk about the FAA because that's a can of worms and it gets going. But since we're the only 2 Americans here, and since it's kind of fall in our lap to kind of do something about this, we have a comment period for the NPRM, which closes March 2nd, which I believe is Tuesday. And so it's really important to write a comment. And I figured personally the best thing to do, if you can't think of anything to say, is just go to FPV Freedom Coalition, and they're on Facebook, and they have a link, and I've linked it also in the group, that just has a 24-page document that has its complete takedown of the remote ID. And it's, here's what you said, here's a better, why it won't work, and here's a better solution. And it really well put together. The guy who put it together was actually a pretty brilliant guy. He's actually working with the Drone Advisory Council, and he's really done well. David Messina. So really, if you can take that document and download it and just say, I don't have much to say, I don't like it, but this guy has remote ID figured out, listen to him. That will do so much for the group, especially because what we tend to see is a lot of people just talking about flying at fields, but not a lot of people talking about FPV and the things that we're interested in. But the question I have for you is, do you think that we've done enough as far as we have over 30,000 comments now?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough thing to say. I mean, I guess we'll end up seeing if we did enough or not. I think we did what most of us can do. This is how it's supposed to work, is that you make a comment and that they actually read and care about your comments, and they don't just go, yeah, we've already got it figured out. This was part of the process, but we don't care. Yeah. So I'm hoping that our comments will matter. I don't know how many of the comments you've been through when I've skimmed and stuff. Most of them have been pretty good. I do think it's important that when you do make your comment, like you mentioned, either just, link to the FPV coalition stuff, or at least try and be somewhat specific and not be emotional. Some of the comments that I've read are just like, I hate this, I'm not gonna follow this, you're ruining the hobby, whatever. Yeah. And I think it's important that you address at least some specific thing of it. What don't you like? What doesn't work for you? Even if it's on a surface level of, my airplanes are made out of $2 worth of Dollar Tree foam, and there's no way for us hobby builders to comply with these manufacturer, FAA approved manufacturer remote ID components, and the cost is prohibitive when you're talking about $2 worth of foam. I don't live near an FAA field, whatever the thing that applies to you is, but to at least be specific in that rather than just being emotional.
Yeah, that's great. And that's absolutely what we wanted to see. Yeah, I was watching the Drone Advisory Council, most of it, and they don't have things figured out right now. There's just so many things that they're working on are years away. So, I mean, I think that their input is the 30,000 so far, hopefully be about 50 by the time we're done. I think that they take notice and they're listening, and there's a lot more we can do being productive as far as being engaged in the process and keeping up on it, as opposed to wait until the rules come out and then taking the FAA to court, because it's going to be very expensive. And when the time to pass the hat around and put money in, it's a lot of people like, hey, I support you 100%, but I'm not going to give you any money.
Sure. So, I think when it comes to some of that, like it is a matter of like, do what we can now. I think whatever happens, there's probably going to be some court cases, and there will be either people that have money that they're willing to contribute, or there'll be people, and I can't remember his last name, but it was Tom when the registration first came out, and he was a lawyer, and he also flew RC, and so he took the FAA to court over that, and he won, which then got overruled later on with a change through Congress. But
it was the registration.
Yeah, exactly, with the registration. So I think it's going to be a long process, and just hoping that in the end we at least get some changes that are favorable.
Okay, so that's kind of what it in a nutshell. Where the group is really focused on INAV. So what I do is I try to, if people have interest, I point out articles. We have one guy who is like, every single time someone posted a video of FAA this or whatever else, and he would post it on the group, and finally I had to say, listen, enough already. I mean, we're only like 40% Americans in the group. We're just here to focus on INAV. So that's it for today. As far as the FAA is concerned, we're done talking about it, but I would definitely appreciate, thanks everyone for the support and the concern, and especially for commenting. So back to INAV, and actually your personal story. You got started with these inexpensive little planes, and then you moved up to, did you start doing any building in that period of time, or did you?
Not really, I don't think. I'm trying to remember like the actual like model by model process, I think it was really FPV that pushed me to go to the next level, but I think it was more drone stuff. I think after those quads, my first experiences were with kind of like 5-inch and bigger FPV rigs. And I know, like, I mean, I'm trying to figure out the exact like timeline with all that, but like one of my first big rigs was a big quad that I was trying to do Phantom 2 stuff, because I was like, why get a Phantom 2? Then you got to strap all the stuff on it. You could just build your own rig. So that was like clean flight before beta flight or any of that kind of stuff was around.
Oh, you go way back then.
Yeah, it's a little ways back. So anyways, that was
that's F1 we're talking.
Yeah, and then with some of the quad stuff, you know, it's just like, the batteries don't last as long and whatever. And I've always liked plane. I've always liked line of sight planes too. So I know I started doing some slope gliders, and it's not quite scratch build, but like that little combat wing up there, that blue one, is like a Zaggy or an XR combat wing, which I did that. And then there's another one that's kind of harder to see, that's yellow. But the yellow one right by there, yeah. So that was more of like one of my first scratch built planes, which is just like 2 sheets of foam. They call it the fly trap, but it's an ultralight glider, so it's supposed to be able to go in really low winds and stuff. So gliders were cheap and easy, and they kind of got the line of sight thing, and then put some FPV on it, put a motor on it, and then go to the next level with that.
So you started off with clean flight, and that's a good thing. I don't know about Darren. I don't know if you started. Did you have any experience with clean flight or beta flight?
No, I used beta flight very, very briefly. I sort of started putting a quad together, but never really got it. Well, it's finished, but every time I fly it, I have problems. Okay, so I gave up on that and just went to the fixed wing.
Mark, how about yourself? Did you do any experience with the beta flight or clean flight?
With clean flight, I think with my first quad about 2 years or 3 years ago, I'm not sure right now. I tried clean flight and also beta flight, but everything was scrapped because it was a 3D printed frame and it was absolute garbage. But yeah, I started with beta flight mainly. Yeah.
Okay, so I have no experience, very little experience with beta flight. What do you think, Jonathan? Somebody who's coming out of beta flight, clean flight, coming into INAV, is that the transition pretty easy?
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that I loved about INAV, where I kind of was like, first got my look at the INAV configurator, and I was like, this is awesome. So my first plane builds that actually had flight controllers were APM, and I don't know if you guys have all used, our Copter or our Pilot.
I tried it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very capable flight controller, but it's complicated. There's a lot of tuning. There's the menus are not simple. You got to look at this whole parameter tree and everything. And I could get around in it a little bit, and I built a couple planes that flew okay. But then finally, a friend of mine kept talking about INAV, and he's like, "You got to try INAV." And so the first thing was when I Googled it, and I was like, "This will run on a ton of flight controllers. I don't have to have like a Pixhawk flight controller or the APM board." And I had a ton of old plane flight controllers anyway, so I could be like, oh, I've got 4 of these flight controllers that'll run INAV. Let's just start putting them on stuff and see how it goes. And then coming from beta flight, the configurators are almost identical. Like, they have different menus, but they look the same. So you feel very comfortable right away going, okay, I know how to click on things and change a couple numbers. And then the walkthroughs and things that you guys have put together, the fixed wing guide is great. And I just literally followed through that and up and flying, and the first plane went great. I did auto tune, I did the servo trim, and I'm like, for just general like FPV piloting, I feel like INAV's still just great. I know some people still talk about APM, and I think if you want to do more complex missions with waypoints, or you want to do some kind of crazy VTOL craft or something, maybe APM is still better, but INAV seems to be catching up, and I would much rather stick with INAV than ever go back to APM.
Yeah, one of the things I miss in INAV really is the possibility to do ground altitude following missions, or even flight modes, and that's possible with APM, but not yet with INAV. That's one of the downsides.
It's catching up, though. I mean, it's growing by leaps and bounds. So when you started with the group, did you look at the manuals, or did you get started, or did you just kind of already know how to work with the planes?
No, I mean, like I mentioned, the fixed wing guide, which is in the files section of our Facebook group, fixed wing setup guide and the auto launch tuning stuff. I went through all those, and I had them on a laptop that had them open, so that when I got to the field, I still had like access, because I'm kind of like diligent and I'll forget stuff, and I'm like, I want to remember how does this work, because there are a few tricks to it, you know. Like servo trim, I think you have to keep engaged until you land, and then disarm in order for it to save. And auto trim is different, where you can just disengage while you're still flying, and that's kind of how you want to do it. So those things are just kind of like, I needed to have a guide with me. But the files and stuff that we've got together make everything pretty easy.
Yeah, that's Mark Hoffman right there. So you never thank you enough, Mark.
Yeah.
And then, so we have a guy here today. And then I don't know if you work with, I saw in one of your videos that you actually have an FR Sky receiver, like it looks like the X9. But I don't know if you've tried the group build on that one yet.
I haven't. Yeah, I have. Yeah. Oh, the transmitter, you mean? The
transmitter, right?
Yeah. I do have the Tyrannus, and I've trying to think. I think I've done my own, just basic OpenTX setups, and I haven't done the pre-built ones yet. But somebody has an INAV Lua script. I don't know who made that, but that's awesome for all your telemetry and stuff. I can just hold down page and go to my telemetry screen, and I mean it's got, you know, horizon ball, and it has your altitude and a graph, and it's super awesome. So I'm a big fan of that.
It's a
go ahead.
It's from one of the INAV developers, so it's also in the official INAV GitHub, the Lua script. I use it too. It's fantastic. Especially cool. if you lose video on a long range mission, it's very helpful to come back.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the flights I had video still, but I didn't I knew where I was, but I didn't know which way I was pointing when I was flying around. So I was using I didn't have, what did it do? I don't know if I didn't have my compass set up or something on my OSD, but I could use it on the Lua script to be like, okay, here's our dot, point that way.
That's fantastic. Yeah, as far as the group build is concerned, if it's worth looking at least downloading it. It's a model by the time you add it, and you follow the guide. Darren wrote an excellent guide. It is really complete, and a lot of people it has basically every feature you need in INAV on there. So, and we've looked at it. We haven't heard a lot of comments back of people saying, hey, we should have this or that. And if there's any comments out there, please let us know as far as what things you'd like to see added.
Well, since I don't know that much about it right now, let me just talk with you about it, so then other people can understand what it is too. So it's a model. So that means it's like switches and everything are pre-programmed. It just loads in?
Everything, yeah. So it has, and the idea was, going way back, was Mark and I, this is going back a year ago, Mark and I sat down and said, well, the problem I ran into is like, I go out the field and I'd have like 3 INAV planes, and then I would go, oh, I want to try this feature, and I'd add it. And then I go try it on another plane, and then like, it wasn't on there. And it was just like, so, I mean, we're talking like basic things like auto tune, auto trim, horizon mode. And I said to Mark, we just got to get something that has everything on it, so that it's one build and everyone knows this is it. I can use everything. And it's like Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. This is one build that rules them all. It's just everything, and something that's so good that you'll never feel like you need to go back in and work on it again. It's just like, and so Mark and I talked about it, and we came up with some ideas, and I put it out in the group as to, like, here's the ideas we have for switch configuration. And Darren said, oh yeah, I can do that. And he talked about how we could put it together, and I was like, okay. And it just, everything, what it has, the basics of it, the switches, I'm thinking that you got manual, then you've got the 3 modes. So you have, and we made it in ways so that everything is logical. So it goes from less control to more control. As you move the switches away from you, you have less control. So at the very bottom, for example, on the switches on the big one on the left, you have acro mode. So that is the most control. And then there's horizon mode, which is one of my favorite modes. And then we go all the way to the top, you get angle mode. Yeah. And then when you go over, so on the switch on the right, you have manual, and then you have the middle mode is those 3 modes I just discussed. And then the very top is 3D cruise, which is something I use all the time as well. And then what you have on the 2 big knob dials, the one on the left doesn't do anything, but the one on the right, if you switch it all the way to the right, it's auto trim. And then all the way to the left is auto tune. But every single one of the dials has a voice on it. So when you switch from one mode to another, you know, like angle mode, horizon mode, and that's good to know.
That's key, yeah, because every time I go out to fly, even with my own switches, I flip everything before I take off to be like, what does everything do again? Okay, cool.
You know, once you do this, it's like every single plane I have, this is all I fly with. It's one model, and the cool thing about it is once you get this thing set up, you can have 20 INAV planes, and it could just be that one model. So it's not like you have to sit there and go, okay, and I'm going to this plane now, and you have to get in your radio and go down, scroll down, and get to the next plane. It's just you just bind it over and over again to all the planes you're flying. So absolutely, it's fantastic. So did I miss anything? Was auto trim, auto tune? Oh, I know what it is. It has, and this is kind of, I think, really important. It has 3 OSD screens, or the option where you can just keep one OSD screen. But what I fly with there's a switch on the very far to the left, a small switch, and with that one, what you can do is, for me personally, the top switch is what I use before I arm the plane. So I have all the satellites on there, and I can look at, you make your own OSD screen. So that's what I did. I put all the satellites, I put the temperature gauges, I put the GPS coordinates, whatever else you need. Everything on that screen. It has nothing to do with flight whatsoever. But I know that when I switch down to the next one, which is my regular flight mode, I don't have satellites on there because I don't really need to know how many satellites you have once you're armed. So you have that one. The middle one for me is kind of like a cruise mode, and then the one at the very bottom is almost identical, but it has horizon, and it has the indicate a little more indicators on it. Anyways, you can make it whatever you want it to be, and we've done some posts in the past talking about different OSD screens. But when you have 3 different ones, I know Mark, for example, likes to have his bottom one to be completely blank. So that way
yeah, I have usually I have on my long range planes and everything where I do missions or some such stuff. I have 3 screens, one with all information, one without the GPS information, like coordinates and altitude for YouTube videos, for example, for specific reasons. And a 3rd screen for just cruising around, and the 4th screen, or the last screen, is always my tuning screen. So I have my PIF values, I have my pitch angle, my power drain, throttle, and all that stuff on the last screen, just for tuning purposes. By the way, you talked about the Tyrannus setup script from Darren. You have to be careful because John is already using the INAV Lua script. So for one of both, he has to disable the voice commands, because otherwise you will first have the voice command from Darren's script that says what you are sending to the plane, and then you get the telemetry feedback by the same voice or by a different voice that talks back what mode the plane is in right now. So you get double commands all the time. So I needed to figure that out, and I prefer mostly I prefer the INAV Lua telemetry voice commands, because then I know what flight mode the plane is in and not what do I send it. Because for example, if I don't have a valid GPS position, or if I don't have a mission loaded, I did some mistake, I rebooted after uploading a mission, and then I switch into mission mode, Darren's script will say, okay, mission mode, and the plane instead will go into acro mode. So it's some kind of safety with this INAV Lua script at this point.
So Darren, did I hit the key points of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other things, like the momentary switch is if you hold that in for 2 beeps, it gives you the OSD menu. If you're interested in that for changing VTX frequencies and power. So that's in there. And also in the documentation, there's the CLI command, so that you can just copy that, dump it in the CLI, and the modes are all set up. So the installation side is quite simple and straightforward. You just put the model on the Tyrannus and then dump that in the CLI, and it's all working. But Mark makes a good point. So maybe we should do a version of the model which doesn't have the sounds to work with the Lua script. So maybe that's an option.
Is it possible to bundle the Lua script in with the?
I can check that out. I can have a look at that. Yeah, certainly.
Okay. That would be awesome.
I wouldn't make it that complex. I would just say, hey, do 2 different sound sets. If the sound files aren't there, then they won't be played.
That's true.
So just remove the sound files that are doubled with the INAV Lua script, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
So, okay, now, thank you for that. Yeah, that is definitely one of the. I can't thank you enough, Darren, for it's just really. It makes the experience of flying INAV that much better when you have this. And I've shown it to people who've had other radio systems, and they end up buying a Tyrannus or some other OpenTX system just because of this. It is so good.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth mentioning that it works with the jumper as well. I've had people saying that it works fine with jumper, so that's not
fantastic. It works with the QX7. It works with all the Horus models.
Yep.
And yep. I think there's another one coming out, or
yeah, I'm looking to borrow an X-Lite from a friend of mine. So once we get that sorted out, there'll be an X-Lite version as well. The issue with X-Lite is the number of switches, so we may have to change some of the functionality and lose maybe a little bit of it, but we'll see what we can do.
So the X9, there's a X9 Lite, which is kind of similar to the X-Lite.
I must admit, I've not looked at that either.
They both have limited switches, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that one may be closer to the QX7 with the switches, but I need to check that out.
Okay.
The other thing, that there's the pan and tilt stuff. So anyone that wants to use pan and tilt, there's a version for pan and tilt already set up. Yeah, but if anyone does have any suggestions, then drop them in the thread, as it's still an announcement. So it's at the top of the group. If people want to add comments in there about features they'd like to see.
Okay, that'd be great. I think we'll do that. I'll put a post out and say, hey, anyone, can you let us know if there's anything you'd like to see added to this, because the group build, it really is excellent, but it's been out for coming out close to a year now.
Yeah. I think it was April last year. I've just had a quick look at the date.
People love it. So yeah. But now that let's get back to the big thing here, which is one of the reasons why the main point of talking today, which is scratch builds. And, we've had a hard time, I'd say, over the last years, in particular, getting planes, like a lot of planes from, not Horizon Hobby, but from the Hong Kong supplier, big one. Hobby King. Thank you. Hobby King. Brain fart there. Hobby King is like, they discontinued the Tech Sumo, which was like one of the nicest planes, and the Bonds. They have a few Bonsais left. And they're just really spotty and getting their stuff in. And, there really has not been a lot of new planes over the last year. And some of these planes are just getting hard to get your hands on these days. So I'm trying to figure out, this is now a time for us to really sit there and look at, there's a whole lot of fantastic planes out there that are scratch builds. And I mean, there's a ton of 3D printed planes, which are always kind of interesting to see those. But the ones that always have appealed to me the most have been the ones that are just the Dollar Tree foam board planes, and what Flight Test has been doing as far as having, here's like plans for 80 different planes, and you can just make these and download them and make them yourself. But then when you start trying to cut it out yourself, it becomes a real nightmare as far as cut these planes out. I mean, it's not impossible, but they have all these, here's 24 pages you have to print out and tile them together. This is tile 1, 2, 3. You can kind of glue them together and you make the cuts this way. And so what they also offer is the same kit, but you can buy it and they pre-cut it for you. But now there's a third alternative, which is for you to actually cut it yourself with a CNC machine. And there's a inexpensive CNC machine that's just come out. There's a whole Facebook group for it. And Jonathan has been doing these absolutely stellar planes that have been with yardsticks and things like that. And so he actually bought one of these, and that was one of the reasons I was telling Darren about it. Like, you know, this guy is kind of like years ahead as far as this stuff's concerned. So what about this, the CNC cutter? Who makes this?
Yeah, so just to go along with what you said there, Steve, I was doing the same thing where, you know, you'd print out all the 24 pages and tape them together. That takes longer than cutting the plane out. It takes forever to do it, and you never get them all lined up, so then things are slightly wonky. So yeah, I just started doing a little bit of Googling, and I had seen some people that had come up with CNCs, and there was one that was the mostly 3D printed CNC, but it's really made for like wood and to be big and to cut this stuff. So I'd kind of made this idea that I'm just going to make one of those and I'll cut foam board. And right around that time, there was this guy named Edward Chu who started that group. And his is called I think it's called Time Save. It's spelled Tim, Tim Save. But he calls it the Time Save. And there's a good Facebook group going. And he's selling kits, but then he has a great YouTube series on how to assemble it. And he also tells you all the parts. So if you want to just go out and find the parts yourself, you can do that. You don't have to buy his kit. His kit is crazy affordable. I think I paid $80 shipped to my house. Wow. With everything. It comes with the Arduino, it comes with all the steppers. The only thing that I guess I did have to get something, there's extruded aluminum rails, and I did have to order that. And I got them on eBay, and I paid a little bit extra because they were in the United States already, and they come quicker. So I think it was slightly over $100 was the end cost for it. But it uses a needle. So imagine like a sewing machine that just goes up and down, and it just runs. Yeah, it just runs on an RC motor with a normal ESC, and you just kind of set an RPM. And it just goes up and down. There's a servo that drives the motor. So it goes down a certain amount to do the score cuts, and then it goes down further to do a full cut. And then it goes all the way up so it can move across and not cut anything. So it's very simple. And then you've got two drivers. It's 2-axis rails. So instead of like that mostly 3D printed machine, which is like a giant square, this one is one rail that goes your X and one rail that goes your Y. And what's nice about that too is the way that Edward designed it, he has thumb screws that attach the two rails together. So you can like unscrew those with your thumbs in about 2 minutes, a minute, and then slide it into the corner or put it under the couch or whatever. It just becomes 2 skinny rails. So it doesn't take up a lot of space, which my apartment down here where I build most of my stuff, I don't have space. So that was a big one. And I've seen people do some crazy stuff with it too. One guy has his configured to sit on the wall and cut on the wall. So he just has it like an art piece. But it's been super cool because one, you can just cut stuff out so much faster. I can cut a sheet of foam board in about 8 minutes. Depending on how you generate your G code, some people are more like 20 or 30, and it depends on how complicated the model is and stuff. But it's great. And like, as you can see, I've been really big into the Versa wings. So I have like 4, I think, planes there that are all Versa wings. It's just so nice to just be able to cut out multiple models instead of, you know, I guess, doing it wrong, but using a razor blade and ruining those plans that I spent so long to put together. And then I can't make another one because I just killed all my plans.
Yeah, John.
But yeah, it's really cool.
Marco is asking in the chat to show us one of your CNC cut wings in detail.
Yeah, let me hop up here just a second. So this, and I actually have some pieces that I could grab too, but so this is like the Versa wing that's been cut. So right away you can tell, like, I don't ever try and do these rounded corners when I cut them by hand because they're just kind of complicated. I just square everything off. So I don't know how much you can tell. Your edges are pretty nice there. They're pretty straight. It's not like the laser cut, because you don't get quite the perfect edge. There's a little bit of, I think they call it kerf, but just the little pieces of fringe paper. And then you don't get the melting on the inside of your foam. But it cuts very straight, very nice. All my stuff comes out pretty square. And yeah, so for $80 to be able to cut out a bunch of these. And the thing that really got me on this, which I'll kind of go into a little tangent here, but so I've done a lot of 3D printing for a long time, and I've followed, Mark, you said you had a 3D printed quad frame. I did that too. I had an RC Groups thread one that I designed out of nylon, and I was kind of selling some of them. But what was cool is I posted on Thingiverse, and it's got like 15,000 views and 3,000 downloads and a bunch of comments and a bunch of remixes where people modified it, which I think is super awesome for the community to kind of get involved. And that's what I really like about this CNC, is that people can now make their own designs. You can just download it and you can print it, and then you can go, oh, that's awesome, but I wish it had a twin motor thing like my stick plane. And then you can modify it and you can post it online, and then people can borrow that. And it just becomes a much more involved process with everybody sharing, everybody coming up with new designs and ideas. And it's so much easier to be able to make the things versus having to print PDF plans and cut them out by hand.
So somebody who's going to be watching is David Story, and we got to have him on one of these days. But he is the king of you mentioned the VersaWing, and you go to his house, and he's like, I've never done a scratch build. Oh, here's a VersaWing 70%. Hey, I'll cut one out for you. And in 20 minutes, he has this little template. He cuts it out, 70% of size. And his logic behind that is it will fit on one sheet of foam. So it is absolutely a ton of fun. So it's about a 600 millimeter wing, maybe a little bit larger than that. And he loves that thing. That's like one of his favorite planes of all, the VersaWing, smaller. But so that's something worth looking at. I know he cut one out for me. I'm putting one together myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you really like that VersaWing? That's like about 1,000 millimeter?
Yeah, it's about that. And I know they've got the Mini Arrow and some other little ones that I just haven't played with yet. Is basically like, oh, I made a VersaWing and it seems great. I'll just make a bunch of them. So I kind of got my build technique and everything down for this one, but I need to explore more of it. And I'm hoping that with these options to create this easier, just like 3D printing, Flight Test is amazing and they're so generous to give away those plans for free for their planes. But the amount of planes they have is still limited by, what they're interested in and stuff. And just when you get the community involved, it's going to be unlimited. There's going to be so many options. So I'm hoping that things like these CNCs that are cheap will spur even more scratch building, and there'll be even more options. I've seen some cool stuff like the DRAC. There's a bunch of versions of the foam board DRAC. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love the DRAC. It's so cool looking, and I'd love to make one of those at some point. So now I'm just kind of getting a little bit out of control where foam board's really cheap. The electronics are a little bit more expensive. So filling the planes with the electronics is now my problem.
But do you have a link to this CNC machine or to this project?
Let me post that here to you, Mark, in just a second here.
Yeah, great, because the chat is asking for it.
Yeah, and this is, if you buy this, you're going to have a house full of planes within about 2 weeks, because
it's real easy to get out of control.
Yeah, it does sound really awesome. I mean, I'm looking at getting a laser, but the problem is that they're about £300, which I guess that's about $350, $400, and you've only got a small sort of 200 by 300 mil footprint with that. And it sounds to me like this CNC cutter, you're basically limited by the length of those aluminium extrusions, and
right, but you can go pretty big. Yeah. The other issue with the laser that I'd seen was that when you're laser cutting the foam, it's like toxic fumes, which you got to have like some kind of way to extract that, which I don't have. So the laser, I think, is kind of the ultimate. If you can do the laser, I think that's the best way to go. Plus, like you had mentioned earlier, balsa, coroplast, all these other things that you can cut, where this is really made to cut foam and nothing else. I saw somebody did cut balsa that was like 1/16, very thin. But for the most part, it's made to cut foam.
Marco is asking, what foam board do you recommend, and what about the durability of these kinds of foam planes?
That's a great question. So I use the Dollar Tree foam board, which I think I'm sending this link to you, by the way, in the chat. So it should be there now.
So Dollar Tree is a store in the United States that's just, I'm sure they have the pound store, I believe, in England.
Right, and I think Adams maybe makes it over there. It's slightly different sized, but yeah, it's $1 a sheet. So like the Versa Wing is 2 sheets, so it's a $2 airframe. As far as the durability, I did run into an issue with that. so since it's paper on top of foam, the foam is totally fine and durable. The paper is not. So we don't get a lot of rain down here in Southern California, but I was out one day when it was kind of misting and the paper got wet. And what it did, which I didn't notice before I launched, was it warped my elevator a little bit so that it was no longer able to hinge. So I threw it, it climbed just from the angle I threw it. And then when I turned off auto launch, it just went down and I had no control. So I've got a couple ideas for that. Flight Test does sell a waterproof foam version. So if you want,
that's really good. Yeah,
if you want to get stuff from them, that should be really durable. The next thought I have is I bought an iron, and I'm going to try and just peel the paper off and then do the laminate on top of it, which I'm hoping will be pretty sturdy then.
Some guy had a video showing how he gets the paper off. It was a process of spraying alcohol on there and then kind of let it sit for a minute and pulls off. So
yeah, I haven't tried that. Honestly, whenever I've peeled it off, it comes off fairly easy. So that's just something I have to experiment with. And I don't know how to laminate anything. I've never mono-coated anything, so that will be.
Oh, it's fun. Process. Yeah, totally. Yeah, unfortunately, I know all about that, right, Mark? He hates my planes because I laminate all my planes. It's
well, I'll have to come to you for tips then. So
yeah, the irons are $20 and you buy the lamination. They sell the lamination in huge rolls. They like lamination.com or something. These places they just sell them. You have to buy 2 rolls at a time, and it can cost you like $40, and it's enough for like 4,000 of your planes. You know, it's just you'll have so much lamination. Otherwise, if you try to buy it by the foot in places like a Loft Hobbies, it's the same thing. It's what it is cold melts. Lamination is what you're looking for in an iron. But yeah, there's different thicknesses. There's 3 mil is probably one that works the best, and it's 5 mil is really thick lamination if you want something that's really durable. But once you start doing it, you'll start noticing your planes fly faster. There's less friction. There's less. The plane just flies. I mean, right away. The best thing to do is to try a plane without lamination, then laminate it and see for yourself. You go, oh my gosh, this is so much better. It's night and day better.
I think the issue will be getting the temperature right of the iron. Because maybe try with a spare bit of foam so you don't melt it. That'll be the biggest thing, is getting that right. But yeah, laminate is brilliant. Once you've done it, it's easy.
My first experience with laminating was when I laminated one of my AR rings to get it more streamlined and get rid of all the bumps on the foam. And the problem was this was just more a decoration for a decoration laminate. It's very thin. It doesn't add any rigidity, and it's just self-sticking. It's not like real hot iron laminate stuff. But Steve, you will be surprised. Just today I ordered a spec ring from a friend. He will cut it from scratch for me with all the equipment for just about 40 euros, including shipping. And yeah, this one will be completely laminated. And a friend of mine who also got one, he said after laminating, this thing is like a tank. It's no comparison to even the AR ring. He said he hit some trees or branches very hard and nothing happens. So I will testing that out with a proper lamination foil.
Yeah, there's different thicknesses of lamination, so they're rated by mil, and so the thinnest one that is available is about 1.7 mil. 3 mil is kind of like a good in-between lamination. It's thin. The problem when they get too thick is that they're hard to move around corners and more difficult to work with. Also, it never quite looks right. what you end up, I think on foam board, it's better than it would be for EPP foam. When you put on EPP foam, what happens is you get these pockets where it sticks and some pockets where it doesn't stick. So it always looks like your plane is inside of a sandwich bag. But that's about the only downside of it. But it makes your plane a lot more durable for crashes. So absolutely it would. And for, like, for example, so David made me the Versa 70%, and I'm going to laminate that so I get a little bit extra rigidity out of it. And it will protect your plane against things. If you're going to there's so many benefits with lamination. I would say that just stick with the Dollar Tree foam board. Just keep the paper on there and just laminate over the top of it, and you'll be fine.
So you think going over the paper will be all right?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Because I was kind of, since I'm taped on top of the paper, I'm like, how am I going to do this? So going over the paper would certainly simplify it.
Yeah, if you go over the paper, it would be, it's a nice surface for it to grab onto. Otherwise, if it gets wet, so if it lands in something that's really wet or on a really wet day, the paper will come off from the foam, and then it's kind of ruined. But you kind of, I think you'll have to go a really long way for it to become a problem. Like you have to land inside of a swimming pool.
Well, I'm pretty much, as Steve, all on board with scratch building now. I think maybe the Stratosurfer that I bought will be my last complete frame. So I'll excited to go down the road with the laminate and see how that works out.
So what models do you have in mind next?
To scratch build?
Yes.
So my main interest right now is my stick planes. I don't know how to describe this exactly, but like, you never know how something's going to fly when you buy like a pre-built model like my Stratosurfer. I know it's like the Bixler. I don't have a Bixler. I just know they're kind of more of a trainer style, whatever. I don't know exactly how it's going to fly though. And one of the cool things that I like about doing this scratch build is you get to experiment so much more, and you get to build something and then say, well, that was cool, but I wish it was a little bit different in this way. And it's very easy to modify and cheap to modify and something to make new versus like my Strato is great, but it kind of is what it is. I can do some little 3D printed mods and whatever to it. But if I break something on it, I have to order parts. And, I don't know if you know with Strix, but Ready-Made RC was out for like 9 months. They were completely out of parts and fuselages. So then you're like, well, what do? I guess it just sits in the corner broken. So my plan now is, as I mentioned before, I had a quad that I kind of designed, and I got a decent following on RC groups, and a bunch of people modified it. I'd love to do the same thing with these stick planes and say, these are things that people can cut at home through the PDF plans. If you get a CNC, you can cut it. You can go get a yardstick. It's very simple, and then have a couple different versions of it. So the first one I started with was just a tractor one, which is still there. It's like one of my all-time favorite planes. It's so relaxing to fly. It's slow. It flies a long time. It's super controllable. So the problem was it's a tractor, so you get tons of prop right in the middle of your video or FPV feed. So I did a little question, which people seem to get a little bit antsy about, when I was like, what's the benefit of a twin? It's not as efficient as a single. But did some reading on the INAV group, and I've started to work on my twin stick plane here, which is a slight different variation over that first one. So the first one is a single piece wing, and eventually I want to do a stick plane glider that has a bigger wing that won't fit in my car. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out a 2-piece wing that has a spar. So that was kind of a test bed for that twin. So that has a 2-piece wing now. And the maiden didn't go as great yesterday as I would have hoped, but it was like one motor mount broke, and it'll be easy to repair and get up. So working on the twin is my next thing. And then I'll eventually get the glider going, which is I'm just gonna use another center section for the wing. So it'll be twice as wide as what it is now. And I'm not 100% sure what the millimeters are. And then the next one is that black Versa wing that has a blunt nose conversion. So it's for FPV primarily. They came out with a little, I think it was a community mod actually, and then Flight Test also started to share it. But it's just you build a Versa wing, and then you stop once you get each side done. And there's a center section here that has a bigger bay for battery, and then another bay for your flight controller. So that would be my next plane then.
That looks like the Spear.
The what?
The Flight Test Spear.
This is I know what you're talking about, the spear. Yeah, I think the spear has a longer nose section that's even bigger than this one.
Yeah,
yeah, this is real similar to that. I'm not sure how big it is compared to the spear, but they are kind of similar. I think this one looks a little cooler personally. But
oh yeah,
sleeker.
Nice. Actually, somebody in the group who lives also in Southern California, he kept buying the spear, and he would like bring it to me to. He didn't have the group build, unfortunately, so I couldn't get the auto tune and auto trim, get it set up for him. But he had it set up, the spear, with it had two 1400 milliamp 4S batteries in the front, and he had a huge motor in the back. And he's like, someone told me to make it just like this, and I did. And I took it out, and that thing was like, you put it on 20% power, and that thing was just like floating on, it's like butter. It flew on rails. Just absolutely a wonderful plane. So awesome. I was really impressed with it. But he keeps since he didn't like get the stuff, he kept taking it out and flying it and putting full power on. The thing would go up to like 800 feet and then come right back down and crash and become confetti. So, but yeah, Flight Test has a lot of cool planes. The Spear, the Goblin is another one that tends to be, people really like that plane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I haven't paid that much attention to it yet. I've seen the peripheries of it, but there's this Master Series. I don't know if you guys have been following that. And I can't think of the designer's name, but he has an Instagram feed that's ridiculous. He's doing foam builds with a different technique than what Flight Test does. And they don't look like foam builds. They look like kit planes. Like all the fuselage is rounded and molded, and he's got a P-38 and he's got, F-35 and all these awesome planes. And he's working with Flight Test, and they are starting to release this new Master Series. And what I want to do, again, with just learning how to design and community stuff is learn some of those new techniques, because that looks kind of like the next step, because the wings are better airfoils and everything's shaped. So I think this foam board stuff is great, and there's more to do with it, and there's more we can grow with it.
There's one guy in Northern California who it's similar to your stick plane idea, the yardstick plane. But what he does is he goes to Home Depot, which is a hardware store, and he buys dowels, like 1-inch dowels, or maybe 3/4-inch dowels, and he builds that to his fuselage, and he's able with that to put on landing gear.
Yeah, the landing gear is maybe a good thing, because that might be an issue with my twin stick here, but
yeah, that might be it right there.
Yeah.
Just kind of, it comes in for a landing, you're gonna have to probably rebuild the plane every single time it lands.
Well, we'll see. It's just, that's one of the nice things, though. I'm gonna crash it and see what happens, and maybe it'll end up being better. I thought maybe I can make folding props work on it or something. I don't know. They might hit the wing, so there's gonna be experimenting. But that's one of the things I like. I flew my Stratosurfer a pretty good distance, and I haven't flown it since. That was like the big thing with it. Like these foam builds have really caught my attention more than those other ones, just because there's so much to experiment and play with.
So that Stratosurfer, the difference between that and the Bixler has more of that dihedrals are turned up a little bit more, so it's more of a floater. The whole idea was it was the Easy Star was one of the first ones that came out. Actually, the very first plane ever built that flew was essentially a Bixler. So back in 1871, the guy in France built a rear propeller, something that was like 16 grams. It was incredibly light. So the concept's been around for a very long time, but back around 2000, maybe a little bit before 2000, this whole movement started with something that's simple, that someone can just take a plane and throw it, where the motor is not in the front, and that was the whole idea. And the original Easy Star was a 3-channel plane, so it had just rudder, and it had elevator and throttle. So that was it, and you could take it out. I actually own one of those. I bought one of those used, and it is a beautiful plane to fly. It is a lot of fun, and I do have Bixlers and other things like that, but this one is just something, the simplicity. It's like the Radiant. It's just something that works, and it floats, and it forces you to just kind of glide around. You can't really bank super well with it, but it does turn very nicely. But the Bixler grew out of the Easy Star. So the Bixler 1 and the Bixler 2. The Bixler 2 to me was what I found to be like the very best of the Bixler line, and in the respect that it is a really nice flying plane. Unfortunately, it does not have a lot of space for gear inside of there, so it's really difficult to get INAV working with that. But it will work if you can make it, stuff it in there. And the Stratosurfer has a flat wing, so it's more designed for speed. So
yeah. Part of the thing was my friend that I do fly a lot with has a Bixler, and he was like, just get a Bixler. But for whatever reason, the blown molded fuselage on the Stratosurfer, I was like, I'm gonna get that one. And they actually do fly together really well. I know that they do get some pretty good speed and power out of the Strix, but with my setup, I have a 3S battery pack in it. It's not like a 4S, so it's not really set up for the speed, and it does cruise nicely. It's just, I don't know, it's not as enjoyable to fly as some of these other planes that I've got going now. So that's kind of why it just ended up in the corner.
Because you're worried about losing it and worried about crashing it.
Yeah, you're worried about losing it. You're worried about crashing it. There is an element of, I'm willing to do things with a cheap foam build that I'm not as willing to do. It's safe things and everything, but I'm willing to go below the trees and kind of work my way through them instead of just stay high and safe and go over them, because I'm like, it's a couple dollars worth of foam. It's light, so it actually ends up being pretty sturdy anyways, and I can fix it with hot glue, and it's not a big deal.
It right there. That is the whole point of, I've been talking about crap builds, I've been talking about scratch builds. A lot of people start off in INAV, and then their whole point is like, I can get a really nice, beautiful plane together. And some of these people, when you see their first builds, Glenn, for example, was a guy who had just like the most beautiful AR wing I've ever seen. And the first flight, he took it out and crashed it. And, you know, he had it on video. It's just an amazing video to watch. But the whole idea about the fun INAV, it should be, as you said, something that you can go out there. I mean, yes, if you have a plane you really care about, chances are you can fly it high, you can fly it away from the trees. Chances are you're going to bring it back in one piece, and it's going to be as good as when it took off. So if you have something you really love and respect, that's the way to do it. But man, there's the fun of this is like, you should be taking planes out, like David's story, for example, same thing. He's just like, that's why he likes building the scratch builds, because he can go out there and just absolutely, his thing is like, I'm going to try flying under a tree 5 miles away. And, you know, this is the fun of it all, pushing yourself and things like that, and knowing like, hey, if worst comes to worst, I'll go pick up the pieces, and for you, what, 20 minutes to get another build going?
Right. Yeah. It's not bad, and it gives you some of that confidence to be like, I can crash it. It's okay. It's not. I'm not going to cry. But some of the other planes, yeah, you're bummed. You know, it's the cost, it's the time to order parts and shipping and all that. And this is like, if you got a hot glue gun in it with a 3S battery, which is my next purchase, you can fix it in the field and just take off again.
Yeah, that's exactly the point why I want to get this spec ring ready, because if it totally breaks and I cannot fix it anymore with some lamination foil or hot glue, then I just get a new completely frame for 20 euros plus shipping. So it's a cheap recover. And also with the AR ring, my first AR ring frame, I think if I would remove the glue now, it would fall apart in 20 pieces or so. And I went to a ring race event last year in October, and I think I smashed it 2 or 3 times into the gate, into the ground, and every time something was broken, got some hot glue, put it back together, and go fly again. And I think if it's a scratch build where you have some foam board or even some cardboard in it, yeah, it doesn't matter. You glue it together and go fly again. Some planes even fly better after they are glued back together than before.
Absolutely. So speaking of planes, now we started, this is a good topic to go with here. You've got the planes you're looking forward to. You've had the Stratosurfer, which you like, and actually that blown fuselage is supposedly really durable. So if worse comes to worse, you just order new wings. But and you're looking at a few new planes this year. Mostly they're going to be around your own designs around the stick plane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to continue with the foam builds and see what Flight Test posts. And you mentioned the Goblin, and I'll probably make it, and it might sit with no electronics for a while, but we'll just kind of see what happens. You know, if something crashes and gets destroyed, maybe I throw the electronics into the Goblin or something instead of, you know, building another Versa wing or something.
The Goblin I've seen from Flight Test, the kit is pretty big, so you might want to build one that's a little bit smaller.
Yeah,
I think
reduce that scale.
Yeah, reduce the scale. I've seen some mini Goblins, people flying those around. They seem to have good luck with those. So as far as planes are concerned, let's keep this going. Mark, what are your big planes? I know that you've had to, I think last year the big plane was the GT Talon.
Yep. So the Talon GT right now is my biggest plane I have. 2 AR wings, and now I go more smaller than bigger with the Dart 250G, and yeah, the 600 millimeter foam board scratch build plane I have here. It flies like shit, but yeah, it flies. And yeah, the next one will be the spec ring, and then we'll see what the future brings. I think I will try one of the flight test planes in the future, and I have some foam board left. I can try and build something. We'll see, but I have no definite plans right now. What to build next?
Yeah, that Versa wing is a pretty nice, really nice wing. You like the way it flies, Jonathan? I think he's muted.
I knew I was going to forget that sooner or later. Yeah, no, I really like the Versa wing. I don't know if you guys saw my my video where I had some quads chasing me with the streamers on the back, but that was yeah, that was the first Versa wing I built. Was just something that I could let those guys chase around, and I was like, this thing's great. So then I built 2 slope gliders, and now I've got the blunt nose one, and we're gonna see how the blunt nose one goes. I'm hoping to get into the mountains with that one and get a GoPro and stuff on it.
So Mark, the Versa wing is something that's it's one of the easier builds that Flight Test offers. So it's also 1 meter, and so it's, you know, a nice all around. If you like the AR wing, it's similar to that. I think you're pulling it up right now, or can we see it pop?
I just wanted to show you guys my first plane I built. It was a 3D printed one.
Which one is there it is right there, the Spitfire.
So yep, it's the Spitfire MK16 from 3D Labyrinth, and yeah, it was also I would call it a scratch build. The only downside is if it crashes, you cannot glue it back together. It will really be only confetti, plastic confetti. And yeah, the first maiden flight was not very successful. I inverted my ailerons accidentally. And after about 40 seconds of very concentrated flying, suddenly I did it roll into the wrong direction and crashed. And yeah, I have still one of them laying around here, theoretically ready to fly, but you can only fly it in a proper on a proper landing strip. So it's nothing for the open wild field.
Beautiful plane though. Look at that. So the plan for this year is a couple scratch builds. Any pre-builds that you're looking to add to the collection?
No plans right now.
Okay. Darren, what are you doing for this year as far as planes are concerned?
I'm working on a couple of things now. It's not INAV, but my current project is this DRAC called Mini DRAC.
Oh yeah.
So that should be ready pretty soon. Then I've got loads of other little projects that I need to finish. But yeah, no real plans for anything new at the moment, except for maybe a spec wing, because they do sound pretty cool. But yeah, one thing I would add is if a Flight Test Nano Goblin flies anything like the Strix one, which from the videos they're supposed to be pretty close, it would be an awesome plane. The Strix Nano Goblin was fantastic. So yeah, I'd definitely make one and give it a throw.
Darren, do you want to INAV your spec ring?
No, I just want to keep it completely within the rules of the competition. So 3S, the motor they specified, just to laminate it and just rag the nuts off of it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Very, very British of you to say that. Yeah, they're the guy who's the king of the spec wing is Jason Waring in the group. He's a group moderator, and man, he just loves those things. And so he doesn't know how to fly though with line of sight. So he has his spec wings are all INAV, and the way he did it was he took the boards and he would take them apart, so you're not stacking them, put the boards next to each other and put them on the wing. And he's had really great experience with it. He really absolutely loves those planes.
So. I'll probably just say that I'll probably be looking at Arthur's spec wing, not just because he's joined the chat, but because it looks awesome and the motor mount looks phenomenal. So I'll probably be getting one of his spec wings.
Which one is that?
The stealth wings.
From
Arthur.
For Arthur's. Oh yeah, Arthur's. Yeah. Oh, Arthur is stealth wing. There RC. He has his own group, and this is a guy. He's our other moderator. He's based in the Netherlands. He is absolutely builds wonderful wings, and so yeah, absolutely a gorgeous plane. If I lived in Europe, my gosh, I'd be buying his planes because they're just absolutely fantastic. Also, I'm kind of hit the limit as the number of planes I could have in the house here without having me and the planes take off out of the house. So yeah, there's kind of I don't know, Jonathan, is your wife mentioning it all? I know you're recently married. Is she starting to mention you're starting to get a lot of planes?
So this one has dogs on it. If you can guess whose plane this is.
Boston Terriers.
So she's watched me do FPV and some of these things, and she's been like, that's so cool. Like, you're over there and you're seeing different stuff than I'm seeing. I want to do that. So I'm like, all right. So she's going to try and learn to fly the slope glider and see if she gets into it. So this is keeping the plane limit a little bit higher right now that she's into it. So.
That's fantastic. We are now going to switch gears because we're getting closer to that time. Wanted to go over, everyone gets 3 wishes, what they'd like to see changed with INAV this year. And so I know Darren has given a lot of thought to this. So Darren, what are your 3 wishes?
Well, the first one, I've been doing a lot of sloping recently, so I'd like to see a couple more glider-oriented features in. I know RGplane has it, but it'd be nice. I've not used RGplane yet. As Jonathan mentioned earlier, there's that parameter list which literally takes about 10 minutes to scroll through. So INAV is way simpler. So I'd like to see some stuff in there like a thermal finder and. Yeah, just little cool glider things would be the first one. Yeah, the other one, I know Mark's given me some suggestions for how this can be done, but I still think it'd be really nice just to have a switch, which is you fly your plane in manual mode and you trim it on the transmitter. And it'd be nice to just land, go into the OSD menu, and then save your trims to the INAV. Which
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and then it's just one switch done. You don't have to remember how to do auto trim or any of that sort of stuff. But yeah, it would be a simple thing to do, and I think it'd be quite helpful. And the last one, it's sort of an INAV request, but it would require a hardware change as well. So it'd be nice if flight controllers started having audio in and out, and then you could have audio in from a microphone or whatever, so you could hear your plane from wherever it is, which I know you can do on VTXs, but it would also allow INAV to alter the signal, so they could send the GPS and altitude coordinates along hidden in the audio signal, which would allow FPV trackers to pick up the plane. Thinking of stuff like the U360 GTS tracker and stuff like that. Like, yeah, picking out the audio signal rather than having to bounce your telemetry back over Bluetooth, and it would just be a cleaner way of doing things.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So that would be my 3.
Perfect. How about yourself, Mark? Did you think of 3?
To be honest, some of my wishes already got done with the recent INAV version, but there are still some things left, like more. Let me switch the camera. Like more navigation point features, like position hold and time delays from one waypoint to another, not only for copters, of course, because planes need to fly forward, but you could also make some kind of stuff like you fly to a specific point and then circle around for, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes, then go ahead to the next waypoint, such stuff. That would be one great thing INAV could implement. Another point I had was, let me think. Now I lost the point.
We can come back to you.
One thing you mentioned earlier, Mark, was about the ground following stuff in Arduplane. So maybe something.
Exactly. So Arduplane has 2 possibilities to follow the terrain follow modes. No, 3 even more. And the first one is with a distance sensor on the bottom, but that won't work for wings because it only works in short distances. It's more meant for copters. But for wings, you can use either a ground control station that supports ground or terrain altitude data and calculates it into the waypoints. So if you set a waypoint, it just will calculate the difference where the plane has to be at what rear altitude. And the third variant on Arduplane is that you can upload terrain altitude data to the SD card that's installed in the flight controller, and Arduplane itself will try to follow the terrain and keep the altitude above the terrain. So the second point, awesome. The second point could be achieved if there would be a proper, well-programmed ground control station for INAV. I think that's my biggest wish, really. There is a great ground control station software. It's called Multi-Wii Planner or MWP tools, but it's only working for Linux and with a little bit of hassle also on Windows. But that's the only one I know for PC or tablets, beside INAV Mission Planner and such stuff, but they are very limited in functionality. So something like Q ground control for INAV would be absolutely amazing.
Fabulous. So that's 2, or is that? You think of a third one?
I think that were my 3 points.
Okay.
Waypoint modes, altitude follow, and ground control station.
Okay, good. Perfect. Thank you. I want to make sure I got everything out of you. So, pal, if you're listening, that's what we want. Okay, Jonathan, what would you like to see?
Actually, Darren and Mark kind of hit on some of mine there too, so I'm going to repeat those. But to finish up on Mark's one there, one of the things I've been really interested in is doing some waypoint flights, and what I really want to do is, if you watch RC Flight Test on YouTube, I love that guy. He's a super smart kid. But he uses Arduplane and does all these things where he, launches it, and then he's running it all from his laptop, saying, fly over here at this altitude. I really want to do that. And I would love it if INAV would do that. So a better ground control station, more options with waypoints and things would be my number 1.
The funny thing is, exactly that point, to say on the map, fly there, fly there, fly there, that was already possible with the old version. Before INAV Mission Planner for Android, there was an app, what's the name? Okay, I can't remember the name right now, but it's discontinued. That's a downside. And there was a feature, exactly that feature in the app, that just sends a waypoint to INAV and then activates the mission mode, but it only works for copters, of course. And then the copter was flying to that spot and staying there. So it was already possible as a workaround, but to have it natively in INAV, that would be great too, of course.
Yeah, just like APM Arduplane, has a really good mission planner built into it. And it would be great that our little waypoint planner page if you could be linked in through telemetry and just be running some stuff through that, that would be cool. And to follow on that, this is going to be count as my second point. So the distance that you can start a waypoint, I think would be nice. And here's my thought with that. As I mentioned, I want to build a glider this spring and do some mountain flying. And I was trying to figure out in my head, where am I going to launch this from that I can get into the thermals? And there's some roads that go up on top of the mountain. So I was like, well, maybe I'll go on top of the mountain and I'll fly. But then I thought, if I start to sink out, what am I going to do? So what would be cool is if you could set up a waypoint out where you wanted to land and set that as your emergency return to home thing. So basically you would just set your home point. And so if I lost signal or I just was like sinking out, I couldn't get back to my launch, I would hit that and it would go land at a certain spot at the base. So I think you could do that. But here's the thing with that, as you mentioned, I won't be able to do that because I have to be within certain distance of the waypoint, right?
No, not anymore. Since INAV 2.4, you can set this value, the first waypoint safe distance. I don't know the exact name for the value right now. If you set it to 0, it's completely disabled. So you can have
I don't have a second point. Thanks, Mark.
That's why we brought you here, so you can talk to Mark.
Exactly.
So it's a new change
cool.
into 2.4.
I can do that now, so that's perfect.
Yeah,
awesome. So, all right, then to jump back to my first point, I think there's a rover mode coming, and that will be my second point, because I do have a truck, and I want to play with that, because it's something I can do right outside my apartment and do at night, and just get to play with INAV even more. And then I'll tell you my third point is the trim instead of have to do auto trim or auto servo trim. Being able to set it from your controller and just save, that would be great.
Okay, I third that as well. All right, so my 3 points. The first one is one that I think that it's more for like the group, but we tell people to set up their flight controllers, and then what happens is, we forgot to mention, maybe we need to put it back in the manual, that if you don't turn off the values of the alarms, what will happen is if you say at 100 meters, your alarm will go off. What happens is your altitude disappears on the OSD. And it just really freaks you the hell out, because all of a sudden you're not paying attention. You look down and where'd my altitude go? And so what I wanted to see is, instead of having an alarm where it turns off, what it should do is just start blinking. And then what it also should do is start sending you a message as a system message, like altitude too high or something like that. So you know right away, hey, I got to fix this. And then that would be absolutely wonderful. The second point was, I want to make sure I would blank out here, and I would. Here we go. Yes, this one is one of my pet peeves, which is when you're out flying, and I don't know if this happens to you, but you're out flying and all of a sudden you hit a spot. I mean, I tend to fly in the same places all the time. So in one of the places I fly, it has a dead spot. And when I fly over it, all of a sudden, I mean, I'm getting my RSSI is 80 or 90. Then all of a sudden it drops to 0. But if you fly around it, it's not a problem. What I wanted to see is if there could be a delay in return to home, so that it gives you you program in a certain amount of time, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, so that if it says okay, I'm at 0, I need to turn around and come back. Maybe let it wait for a second or two and see if the signal comes back. So if the signal comes back, you just hit a dead spot and you keep going. Have you guys had an issue with that?
I think there is a setting in the failsafe where you can set how long it is before failsafe activates. So that might already be in there.
Okay.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
There's a failsafe delay. The default is 500 milliseconds until stage 2 is activated, and stage 2 is the failsafe procedure. You activate return to home or land or so. You can even set it to 2 seconds, but only recommended to have a longer time if you are flying at high altitudes or at a safe distance to objects, of course.
Perfect. Okay, so there we go. Hey, we do something else as well. And the third one is something I know that INAV doesn't do, because if it did, we'd be talking about it all the time. And that is, I'd like to see, this is a big one for me, is macros for INAV. So you can actually record now a couple different things. So you can have either macros, so the very least, it would be a macro for doing a particular thing, like doing a flip or whatever you want it to do. So you just kind of like set a macro and you can have a switch execute it. So when you push a switch, all of a sudden I'm doing a 360-degree roll. And but the one thing I think would be really helpful is if we had altitude. You have your GPS coordinates and altitude set up as well to record, so that when you're teaching someone how to fly, for example, and they don't know how to land, you go out and you actually record a landing for them and say, okay, go out and fly, take off. When it's time for you to land, flip the switch and it's going to do like a return to home, but we're going to know that it's going to follow into a flight path and will land itself. Just make sure you turn off the throttle, or it will take control of the throttle and it'll bring it in. So we'd have to have control of all the control surfaces and the throttle as well. And the reason I think this is important is because at some point I'd like to start working on doing things. The idea I have is that out where I live closer. Jonathan lives close to the beach. I live closer to the mountains. And about 3 or 4 times a year, some kids will go up there, or sometimes adults, and they'll get lost up in the mountains. And what ends up happening is they send search and rescue up there to go looking for them. And sometimes they're like 2 or 3 miles off the path, but it takes them 4 days to find these people. So a lot of times these people die of exposure before they can get found, especially in the wintertime or in the heat of the summer. What I was hoping to do is someone like myself could go up there when no one's around, where they're not looking for anybody, and record macros of like flying very close to set up a flight path where you fly close to the trees, and so you kind of like look around with that. So you would have different things, flights set up. Then what would happen is at nighttime, or when the helicopters couldn't fly, you would either have something that would have, they have really nice night cameras now that can kind of see pretty clearly. Those new DJI goggles see exceptionally well. So in situations where it's not safe to put a helicopter up, you can put the plane up and you can see upwards of 4 miles away. But the thing is that you probably would want to have something where the flight was recorded as trying to control the flight the entire way. So it's just following a grid or whatever else you wanted to do in that particular pattern. So I know that's kind of big to do something where it records, especially doing all the sophistication like I'm talking about. But to me, that would be something that would be just really fantastic if INAV can do that.
To be honest, at the moment this is possible. There would be 2 different ways to achieve that. One is the more complicated but accurate way. If you use the INAV black box feature, you can save a black box of your complete flight path with GPS coordinates and all that stuff. And then you could, of course, extract these GPS paths and make a waypoint mission out of it. The only downside is you are limited to 60 waypoints right now. So that's the limit of INAV. And the second point, or the second way would be, I think, I've never tried it yet, but INAV has a save waypoint feature. So in flight, you can flick a switch to mark the spot where you are right now as a waypoint. And then you could use a script on your Tyrannus, Darren, that's your job, to, let's say, trigger this impulse every, let's say, 5 seconds or so. And then it will automatically set a waypoint every 5 seconds until this 60 waypoints are full. And then you can later land, save that in the fixed memory of the flight controller. You can store them in the via the CLI also. And then you can repeat over and over and over the same flight.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so it can do this.
With that, Mark, when you're flying the waypoints, could you control other things? Because I think Steve and I had a brief conversation about this, and I think one of the cool things would be that the plane flies the waypoint, while the pilot, in effect, controls the pan and tilt to actually look for the people in that situation. So is that something that's I've never used the waypoint stuff. So if a plane's doing an automated waypoint, can you still control pan and tilt? That sort of thing.
Yes, of course. Only the flying, the direction, the throttle control is done by INAV itself. You can still override the throttle by if you activate it in the CI to give more thrust to fly faster, but not slower than the normal cruise speed. And you have still full control over every other channel, like pan, like tilt, like camera recording, and mode switching, and all that stuff.
Ah, cool.
Interesting. Yeah, there's one of the things we're trying to work towards is, it's a pipe dream for now, and I was really hot and heavy on it until the FAA thing came along, and now I'm starting to feel better about the FAA thing, so I'm going to start looking at this again, which is to come up with a our group represents people from all over the world, and what we have all over the world in common is we have our own set of personal different natural disasters. So out here we have earthquakes and occasionally flooding, but it's really earthquakes, and the potential of a tsunami as well, but so far they've really been an issue in Southern California. But what will happen is when we have people like in Indonesia, for example, and they get earthquakes, they get tsunamis, they get all like the worst of everything. And we get people that get in situations where you're pretty much on your own. And so our first responders are set up for small disasters. So things, I saw it for myself. I lived out here in Southern California when we had the 94 earthquake. I think it was before Jonathan's time here. But what ended up happening was pretty much you're on your own for, it was not as bad as it could be. It was not the big one, but it was big enough so that, there was a lot of different issues. And what I wanted to do is come up with a plane where we'd have like a group build where it is set up for search and rescue, so that we have a member who would go out, Lace goes out with someone else, and they'll go down before floods occur, and they'll go look for people like stuck in their houses. They'll go fly around a certain area and look for people. And that's kind of what I was hoping to do with this as well, being able to search and rescue for people. And the technology right now is really starting to get there where, we look at the DJI goggles, you can see, they're incredible. You can see very clearly something. We're flying 4 miles away. It's not like analog where it's kind of like, I guess someone's on the roof. No, you can fly over a roof and say that there's 4 people standing on the roof right over there. So, here's the GPS coordinates. Let the people know. When they're sending out search and rescue, go to this place. So that's awesome. Also in places where, countries where they have tsunamis, you will have to go look for people. So the idea would be come up with a plane and deciding which plane that would be, and come up with an INAV build and having all the different features that this is a plane that's designed for search and rescue. That's kind of like a long-term goal for, I think, what I'd like to see what the group do as far as being able to do benevolent things like that.
You know what's funny? There was already a plane on the market, an affordable plane that completely could do that. HD video feed, long flight times, long range, all that stuff. With 720p video transmission, the Parrot Disco. But it completely failed on the market because it was just, I would say, for a foam plane, it was too expensive for the casual user at the beginning. I think they sold it for $1,700 or $1,800 in the beginning. They quickly dropped the price to around $1,000, and it was still too expensive. But if you remember back, a friend of mine got one for around 400 euro or 300 or 400 euros last year. I also made a video of it, and it's like a DJI drone but with rings and an hour of flight time. It's fantastic plane for exactly that stuff.
And if anyone has one of these failed planes for sale cheap, please email me.
Me too.
I just watched the video the other day of the guy in Hawaii that has his set up with the 4G mod, and he flies 10 miles across the ocean to another island. But once he's there, he flies at 75 feet just over the trees because it's 4G, so you don't have to worry about your radio waves or anything being low. And It's amazing. It's so cool.
Yeah, this guy is amazing. I think he had in total 3 paradiscos. The first one he lost before he did the 4G mod. The second one he did this flight over the ocean, and later he tried a mission flight between a few islands, and the whole mission was about 1 hour and 10 minutes or so. But the plane never came back because maybe he crashed somewhere into a cliff. And then the third one, I think he still uses it. What's his name? It's what was something with D at the beginning. I need to search the channel, but it's really fantastic what he does with that plane.
We'll put it in the links, the show links. It would be awesome to do that. Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. So that would be like a long-term project of like the perfect plane. David Story suggested we use the Akabird, whatever that fin wing plane. He said that it flies slow. It's a twin engine plane. It's just perfect for what we're looking for. You can load it up with batteries. So, at least start thinking about this. Let's start getting the ball bowling. The idea would be that we would work on it as a group. We would get the flight controller set up perfectly. Everything would work, and it would just be like a copy and paste. Here, if you live somewhere else, build this yourself. And the idea is that there's no corporation behind this, so there's no profit motive behind this, and we can deploy this around the world pretty quickly if we had something that was feasible. But feasible still is going to be, I am thinking like this is going to be at least $1,000 by the time you start adding up all the gear.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few planes that could probably work. I think it's either the XUAV Clouds or the Snow Goose that has already got a bay in the bottom. For a downward facing camera, or it might be the Believer, but there's one big plane where you could stack up.
Actually, David suggested the Snow Goose, not the Akabird. That's a pretty big plane though. Have you seen it?
Yeah. It's a big plane, but it can carry a lot of batteries and lots of flight time, so it would do quite well, I think. But Arthur's put up another good use for that technology that you suggested, like putting out a grid and using the scan to look for dolphin pods and count environmental impacts, as well as the search and rescue. There's lots of different.
Great. So you can offer to education, for research. Dolphin pods. I hadn't thought of that. So yeah, it's another great thing to do. So yeah, if we can start thinking about this as a group and start brainstorming as to maybe it is the Snow Goose and how we set it up and what flight controllers and everything else like that would be perfect. Before we go, I just wanted to mention one other thing, which is someone asked that I mentioned there's a video of the first FPV plane from the 1980s that someone posted on the group. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen it, and I watched the first, I think, 20 minutes or so, and then skipped a little bit through how it develops. It was really, really amazing. So I think the video feed he had at the end of the video was something like when I'm 20 kilometers away or so. And it was really impressive how well it worked actually with the technology from that time. So it was really completely analog. There was no digital video processing or noise compensation and all that stuff, but he still was able to fly FPV with it.
And it was interesting too, because this was a guy who was in Texas and in Houston, and so he was trying to make it as a rock star. So he has the total 80s hairdo and everything. So it looks like Nigel Tufner from Spinal Tap. And he's out there like rocking at nighttime and working at the Guitar Center in the daytime. And then on the weekends, he gets up and he flies this thing. And the guy is absolutely brilliant. I mean, the planes, he had to hand build all these planes for this specific task. Some of those, the cameras, I do know that the color camera he was flying around, that was probably good 12 ounces to a pound. That is a pretty heavy thing he was putting in his plane. And he's taking it a mile out. So that thing must have held a hell of a lot of fuel. So really interesting to see where we came from. Oh, one of the things he did was he wanted to know where the guy was really quite brilliant. He wanted to know where his plane was heading. So what he did was he put on, he built this little device that would say, it was a compass, but it would shout out north, 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 north. And he put a microphone on the plane and bring it back so he could hear the plane knowing that he's north. The plane's flying north. And then he started figuring out, like, he would start losing the plane, but he'd start moving the antenna, and the signal would improve. And then he'd figure out, okay, I kind of know where I'm at now. I know which way the plane's going. I know with that much information, I can bring it back to me. Really intelligent. And it was just kind of like, it makes you really think about the things we take it for granted in INAV are things like people had to spend a lot of time, a lot of money. He had to become a hammer 8 operator just to work with some of the gear he was working with, because he was working at 1 watt as the video transmitter. Really, we've come such a long way, and the things we can just get for dirt cheap now are things like he would have given, and it would have saved him. Oh my God, you probably would freak out seeing what we can do with INAV, with the built-in compass and everything else. Return to home. That's amazing. I do want to thank you guys really for a fantastic chat. Mark, this is thank you for hosting this again. This is really fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it was working pretty well today.
I hope so. Yeah, hopefully we got everything. Darren, thank you for cleaning up for us. What's behind the green screen?
Oh, yeah, that's just that needs to be cleaned up here. But no, this guy from the 80s, what would be really cool is to try and track him down maybe and get him in the INAV group and find out if he's stuck with planes and where he's at now, or if he gave it up, maybe try and reintroduce him and see what he thinks of the current technology.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
I left him a message saying, hey, we got this group and your videos, like, the first time I watched this video, I had like 400 hits, and all of a sudden, like 2 days later, it's 4,000. So it's catching on. Like, this is completely amazing. And I'm hoping I put the invite out. We'd love to have a guy like him in the group, or, you know, it would be great to have as a guest. Just come on and kind of like tell your story, and kind of like, because this is such an amazing, we're talking like early 80s, like 84, 83, somewhere around there. And just, I mean, it was all gas, and they had to hand build these planes, and they're beautiful planes too. It was, you know, oh my God, night and day. It makes you just have total appreciation for what we have, I guess. So that's the best way to say it. Speaking of appreciation, I appreciate Jonathan Jelkin being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. You learned a lot. I learned a lot. You can, it's absolutely, what you're doing is really fantastic. How do people get a hold of you in the group? Just find you? And
yeah, just tag me in a post or something. I'm usually popping pretty often. So.
Okay, and you're open for people messaging you and with questions and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Like, I love this hobby. I've loved it for a long time. I love getting other people interested in it, and just collaborating with people. So feel free to reach out about anything. That's
true. And then also, just Mark is 100% approachable. He loves hearing from you. Darren's very approachable too. He's got a wife and he's got a career, so he'll get back to you sometimes, but, you know, he's absolutely, I mean, we're all passionate about the hobby, and that's kind of what makes us all tick. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you next time.